Next, we are working with head side, which is piece 2. If you're doing views A, B, C, or E, this does have some placement lines. You'd want to make sure that you transferred before you take the tissue off. I'd also transfer the center line. Then, depending on which view you're doing, you will attach the ears at a different point. So I'm doing view D, the cat, and so I basted the ears to the head on the dots or small circles before this step. Same with the dragon, view E, you will baste the ears to the head first and then do this. If you're doing the other views, A, B, or C, you can see it has placement lines for those, and you'll sew those ears on later after you have this head side piece put onto the head. Before I attach this piece to the head, I'm going to put the short ends together. So I'm lining up my fabric right sides together, and then I will pin or use clips to secure this. And then I'll go to the machine and I'll sew this with a regular stitch length. I've been basting, so I'll make sure I reset my machine back to a regular stitch length, and I'll sew this and then press it open. Now I'm stitching the head side to the head piece. You want to make sure you take time to line this up properly before you sew it. So on my head piece, I have a double notch. It's a little bit small. And then this edge of the pattern piece that has the double notch, which I cut that as a bigger notch here rather than 2 little notches, then that tells me, okay, that is the double notch, that it's this curved edge that's going to be lining up around the perimeter of the head piece. So that is helpful to know. And then you can also use the seams and the center line to help you. So I'm going to take the seam and so I gotta make sure I flip it around to get my double notch on the right side. And I'm lining up the seams on the bottom. I don't really want the seam on the top, so I'm putting those on the bottom. So those will be sandwiched right on top of each other. The seams are pressed open, and make sure you line them up correctly. Next, I'm lining up the center on the top. So I have the center point of my head, which is my seam line there, and then the center line that I marked from my pattern piece, and I'm going to line those up. Next, I would line up my double notches, which should be about halfway in between those center top and center bottom points that I lined up. And I like the Wonder Clips for this because I just find them easier to move and adjust than putting in a bunch of pins. Then once I have those 4, what we would call quarter points clipped together, then I'm going to take my time to really make sure I line up these edges properly. I like to clip in the middle and in the middle again because these are curved edges. I want to make sure I distribute all that fabric evenly as I get it lined up. So take your time to do this. Now I have this clipped together, and I'll just want to make sure I don't have any unexpected folds where I've clipped the fabric together and that it's all lined up evenly. Then I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'll be sewing around this seam that I've clipped with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. As I'm stitching this on the sewing machine, I will want to take my time. When you have curved fabric pieces like this, it's easy to get little like folds where you don't want there to be folds in your seam. So just try to make sure you take your time. The fabric's laying flat before you stitch over it. You can always go back and fix things, but it's just easier if you take your time in the first place, and then you'll probably have less to fix. Remember, a 5/8 inch seam allowance for this seam. If at any point I feel like I need to stop and adjust my fabric because I'm getting a fold, it's okay to lift the presser foot as long as you just put your needle down first or set your machine to stop with the needle in the down position. Then if you need to lift the presser foot to adjust anything, you can, to try to avoid any of those tucks or folds you might get. Now that I'm coming to where the seam is, I'll pause to just make sure on top and bottom that the seam is going to stay open. Like here I can see it pushed over, so I'm just going to make sure I adjust that because I want to sew the seam allowances open just like I pressed them. Also, just another tip as you're sewing, if you start to see any little folds, a lot of times you can gently pull on the fabric. Not so much that I'm trying to rip or stretch it a lot or pull it to force it through the machine, but just a gentle little tug will sometimes help it lay flat as you sew over it to avoid any folds. Now the best way to evaluate my seam and see how it turned out is to turn it to the right side. So I will look and see if I have any folds that are going to be problematic. And if so, I would just go back and unpick around that area where I had the fold. But it looks like it turned out well. And then we're ready to move on to the next step. This is an outward curve or a convex curve, so we're going to notch to remove some of that bulk to help it turn more smoothly. I can take my shears and do a bunch of little triangles like this. That's just going to be pretty time consuming. And I do them about that far apart. You can also use pinking shears. Like you see that it would make this just a bunch of little notches continuously. And then you may have to go in and add some just little clips since they won't be quite as close. But we do want to notch either with pinking shears or regular shears to help this seam turn out more flat and smooth. And take your time and just do that all the way around the whole perimeter. I'll probably do the pinking shears, except for when I get to the ears and it's extra layers of fabric, I'll probably do the shears because that will be a little bit thick for the pinking shears to get through.